All right, so we have a table here. We're going to graph sine and cosine functions. On Wednesday, we'll do tangent. So we're going to do sine and cosine in two parts.
Is it easy?
It's not bad. So the first one we're going to look at is just this row right here. This is just like a row here. We're going to do sine function first when the x values or the input are in radians here. Notice these inputs are in radians.
What does that mean?
That's what goes into the function, pi over 2. So basically you're thinking about on the unit circle, where is sine 0? It's at what degree measure?
0.
Right. We just put 0. So at 0, the sine of x is 0. Pi over 2. What is sine at pi over 2? 1. So the input into the function was pi over 2. The output was 1 for sine. If the input is pi, what is the output for sine? 0. If the input is 3 pi over 2, what's the output for sine? Negative 1. And then if the input is 2 pi, what's the output? 0. So let's graph those, okay? You guys, come on now, stop talking.
Oh my gosh.
So these are ordered pairs. I'm going to list them as ordered pairs. You may not need to do that, but I'm just going to do them as ordered pairs. Pi, 0, 3 pi over 2, and negative 1, and 2 pi and 0. Input, output for sine function. Okay? Now, this line here is called the baseline. X-axis is the baseline. So I'm just going to label that right now. That'll become important a little later. I'm going to call that a baseline. Actually, even more tomorrow. Not really. You'll see it today, too. Let me see the best way to do this. Well, let's just plot these points. Okay, we're not going to connect them yet. We're just going to plot them. So obviously, hopefully at this point in your math career, you know what 0, 0 is.
That's your question.
0, 0, right? I can't really go any further because I haven't labeled these yet, have I? So down here, I want you to make an asterisk to yourself or a star or whatever. There's always 4 intervals and 5 points. Always 4 intervals and 5 points for sine and cosine graphs. So notice our x-axis, we need to have a 0, we need to have a pi over 2, we need to have a pi, we need to have a 3 pi over 2, and we need to have a 2 pi. So how high do I have to go? What's the highest x value I have? 2 pi. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, so here would be 2 pi. Here is pi, halfway in between 0 and 2 pi. And then halfway in between there is pi over 2. And then this would be what? 3 pi over 2. You don't always have to figure that out. I'm just kind of showing you that for this one. Now we can plot these points. Actually, before we do that, let's split our x-axis up into 4 intervals. So I'm going to draw like these dashed lines so I can sort of see where my intervals are. It's just a little bit easier to see it. Do it lightly. Now I can plot my points. If I have pi over 2 and 1, that would be right here. And then pi and 0 is right here. 3 pi negative 1 is here. And 2 pi and 0. How many points do I have there?
5.
And how many intervals?
4.
Okay. So I can connect them, and they're curvy. They're not in a V. Okay? So they're curvy. This is a sine graph. That is a sine graph. It goes forever, both directions. It's used to represent like sound waves. Do you remember in 8th grade? Did you do sound waves in 8th grade? Anything that repeats or oscillates, it can be represented with a sine graph. Okay? Yes, it can. So we could also go into the negative. So it's just like the y is your reflection point. So if I went 2 over here, I could go 2 over here and then 2 more. And this graph goes forever. So you notice it's going down here. So you can kind of continue the graph just with those 2 points. And it kind of keeps going into the negative that way.
Wow.
A little bit off, but you get what I mean. So that's a sine graph right there. That's the very basic sine graph. Guess what we're going to be doing to that sine graph tomorrow?
No.
Shifting it.
Yay.
Okay?
So excited.
And then maybe even a little bit today. All right? So now let's do cosine. All right, let's go up here and do cosine. So remember, cosine is the which coordinate?
Y. X.
X coordinate.
There we go.
So when what is the output when the input is 0?
One. Just on the opposite.
Yes, there you go. And then pi over 2 would be 0. At pi, what is the x coordinate at pi? Negative 1.
0.
0. And at 2 pi, what's the x coordinate?
1.
1. So I'm just going to list those ordered pairs. 0, 1. You don't have to, but we have enough time that I'm going to do it. And 2 pi and 1. Okay. So again, we always have 4 intervals. And our x, they happen to go up by the same amount here. So we're just going to go up to 2 pi here on our x-axis. And then halfway in between is what? Pi. Halfway in between 0 and pi is, and then this is 3 pi over 2. Okay? Now you're going to notice that the cosine graph does not start at 0, 0. Where does the cosine graph start at? 0, 1. That's where the cosine wave or graph or whatever you want to call it starts. It's still going to have 5 points. And it goes down here. And then it goes up to this x-axis again, x-axis, and then it goes up to 1. So it's kind of more of a, just like it's only got one little bump like that, and it starts up high. And it would go down again here. And here, again, you can kind of reflect over the y-axis to get these other points without even putting too much effort into it. You could keep going in the negative direction. It's not even shifting. It goes forever. So all I did was I said, okay, this one's here, that point's there, that one's here, that one's here. However you want to look at it. It does shift pi. You could say that. Okay. So that's those are the 2 basic graphs. Now, there's 2 words that are important. Amplitude and period. What do you think the amplitude does to it?
Go up and down.
Yeah, it tells you how high it's going to be. Okay? So we'll start with that. Amplitude is the absolute value of A. And here is A, of course,
Where?
in the equation, right here. There's A. And amplitude is how high / low the wave goes above or below the baseline. So look up here. What's the amplitude of this equation right here? This function, what's the amplitude? What's A? 1. So look, here's my baseline. The wave went up 1 and below 1. That's what the amplitude tells you. Okay? It's not a total of 1. It's 1 above and 1 below the baseline. All right. Period. I'll do that in a different color. It's the horizontal length of one cycle. And you find it by doing 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Here's b. So that's how b comes into play. So if you look up here, right here, this from here to here is one cycle. What was the period of that cycle? 2 pi. Same with this, right? One cycle is 2 pi. What's b in this equation? 1. 2 pi divided by 1 is 2 pi. That's why the period is 2 pi. Same with this. b is 1 here. That's why the period remains 2 pi. Okay, so let's mark that on here. From here to here is the period. That's 2 pi. Same with this. From here to here is the period, and that's 2 pi. How you feel about that so far?
Good, let's go.
Let's practice 2 of them, and then that's it for the day.
Alright, make it quick.
Okay? So, graph the function, identify the amplitude and the period. So first of all, here's my function, y equals 5 sine 2x. What's the amplitude? What's the a? Correct. A equals 5, so that one was easy. What does the amplitude tell me? How far above and below the baseline? The baseline is the x-axis, so I can just go ahead and mark right on the y-axis how high and low my graph is going to go. So I'm just going to kind of do this and this. That's the amplitude. That tells me that right there. Okay, I have to do a little bit of work to get the period. Remember, the period is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. What is b in this equation? 2. So it's 2 pi divided by 2, so my period is pi. Now, I have to know how to split up my x-axis. If my period is pi and I need 4 intervals, how do I split up find those 4 intervals? What do I do? Yeah, so I can just start, like right here, by putting this as pi. And what is halfway between there? How would I mark that? Pi over 2. And what's halfway between those two? Think of a cookie. It's a quarter. Okay? Pi over 4. I like cookies. All right, then what would this one be? 3 pi over 4. Okay? All right. Now I'm just going to kind of sketch my interval lines here, just because it makes it easier to plot those points. Now, we don't really have ordered pairs here, do we? But we have to remember, since it's a sine graph, where does it start?
0.
0, 0. So I'm going to put a point at 0, 0. And then, does it go up or down? Up. And it's going to go as high as my amplitude on my first interval. So it's going to go up here. And then it comes back down and hits the x-axis. And then it comes down to this low point here. And then it comes back up and hits the x-axis again. And that is a sine graph. So you have to check to see, is it sine or cosine? Sine starts at 0, 0. And then you just kind of connect them. Now, I want you to go in the negative direction. So however you want to look at it, I'm going to reflect over 2 and 4. Just kind of continue it sort of as a sketch. And it keeps going that way. Not so bad, huh? Okay, let's do one more. We'll do a cosine. Oh, wait. just to be clear, because I was told to identify the period, I'm gonna write it back up here.
Let's go.
There we go.
Who told you to do that?
Right here. Okay, so let's do this one. Same thing. What's A? What's the amplitude? What would you do right now on your graph then?
Mark 2.
Mark 2 up and 2 down.
So why is there 3 if you're only going up 2?
I don't know, just to make it easier to look at it. I don't know. All right, A is 2. Now let's do the period.
Divided by pi over 3.
Right, it's 2 pi divided by pi over 3. So what happens? So I multiply, yeah, by 3 over pi. The pi's cancel out, and I get what? 6.
What the flip? Oh.
So it doesn't have to be in radians. It can just be a number.
What's underneath 3?
Pi. Can't you tell? So 6 is my period. So I got to mark this as 6. And then I have to split that up into 4 intervals. So what's halfway in between? 3. And then what would this be?
6.
1.5. And this would be what?
4.5.
Okay. And then I'm just going to sketch my little... Now be careful. It's a cosine graph. So where does it start?
It starts at the top.
Starts up high.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Okay? Starts up high, goes down to the axis, and then it goes down low, and then it comes back up to the axis, and then it goes back up high.
It's a V.
It's like a V, except it don't make it like a V, curve it a little bit. And it's going to go back down again on that end. And then, again, you can just kind of reflect those points over, and then you can sketch this part into the negative.
These are graph plotters.
I haven't tried it. Probably. I'm sure they are. Okay? Now, I have a question for you. Shh. So you might see this on your homework. What happens, take a look. What if you had this? It's just flipped. So instead of starting up, you would start where? Down. Make sense? Okay? All right, that's part 1. We'll do the other part tomorrow.